Cleveland, Ohio, May 21st, 1966. The fight between heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali and challenger Henry Cooper was still 3 days away, but the atmosphere at Ali's training camp already hummed with unusual tension. Something about this match felt different to those close to the champion. Ali's usual pre-fight bravado was conspicuously subdued. Instead of the theatrical predictions and colorful poetry that had become his trademark, he was spending more time in quiet contemplation, occasionally flipping through newspaper clippings about his opponent with an expression that his trainers couldn't quite decipher. "You're awful quiet about this one, champ," remarked his trainer Angelo Dundee as he watched Ali methodically work the speed bag. "Got something special planned for Cooper?" Ali paused, letting the bag swing to stillness. "I've been studying this man," he said, his voice lacking its usual playful quality. "There's something about him that's different from the others." The others were the 15 professional opponents Ali had faced since claiming the heavyweight title from Sonny Liston 2 years earlier. Each had fallen to Ali's remarkable combination of speed, power, and tactical brilliance. Most had also endured his psychological warfare, the taunting, the predictions, the emasculating nicknames that often defeated them mentally before they ever stepped into the ring. If you like the beginning of this story, hit the subscribe button now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this amazing story. Your support means the world to me. But Henry Cooper was indeed different. At 32, the British fighter was nearing the end of a respectable career that had earned him the admiration of boxing fans for his courage rather than his championship credentials. His most notable moment had come 3 years earlier when he had knocked Ali, then still known as Cassius Clay, to the canvas with a devastating left hook before ultimately losing the fight. Since then, Cooper had suffered a series of defeats and health issues that had many questioning why he was even being granted this title shot. What Ali had discovered in his research was that Cooper had been fighting with a potentially life-threatening condition. The British boxer suffered from a severe tendency to cut, particularly around his eyes, a condition that had turned many of his previous fights into bloody affairs. More concerning was the recent discovery that Cooper had a heart murmur, a fact that his trainers had attempted to keep private, but that had leaked to the press in London. "You know about Cooper's heart problem?" Dundee asked, following Ali's gaze to a newspaper clipping that mentioned the British fighter's health concerns. Ali nodded slowly. "Man shouldn't be fighting with a condition like that. One bad punch could." He didn't finish the sentence. The training session continued, but those present noticed a change in Ali's approach. He worked on his defensive moves more than power punches. He spent extra time practicing his footwork, the lightning-fast movements that allowed him to evade rather than absorb his opponent's attacks. It was as if he was preparing for a different kind of fight than the devastating knockouts the public had come to expect. That evening, Ali received an unexpected visitor at his hotel suite. Howard Cosell, the ABC sportscaster who had developed a complicated but mutually respectful relationship with the champion, had come for what was supposed to be a routine pre-fight interview. As the camera crew set up their equipment, Cosell and Ali spoke privately by the window overlooking Cleveland's public square. "Something on your mind, Muhammad?" Cosell asked, using Ali's chosen name at a time when many broadcasters still insisted on calling him Cassius Clay. "You seem preoccupied." Ali hesitated, seemingly weighing how much to reveal. "Howard, what's your responsibility when you know something about your opponent that maybe even he doesn't fully understand?" Cosell, known for his verbose style, was momentarily silent, sensing the gravity behind Ali's question. "Are you referring to Cooper's health issues?" Ali nodded. "The man's got a heart condition that could kill him in the ring, and his face, You've seen the pictures. He bleeds if you look at him too hard." He paused, wrestling with a moral dilemma few could understand. "My whole life is about hitting people, Howard. That's what makes me the greatest. But there's a line between defeating a man and destroying him." The conversation was interrupted as the camera crew announced they were ready to begin the interview. What followed was a public performance that revealed none of Ali's private concerns. He gave Cosell the charismatic, confident character the public expected, though viewers familiar with Ali's usual pre-fight demeanor might have noticed that his customary predictions of which round his opponent would fall were notably absent. After the camera crew departed, Cosell lingered, clearly intrigued by the glimpse of vulnerability he had witnessed in the usually impenetrable champion. "Whatever you're thinking, Muhammad, remember that Cooper chose to be there. He knows the risks," Cosell offered, perhaps sensing Ali's moral dilemma. Ali moved to the window, his silhouette framed against the Cleveland skyline. "A man can choose something without understanding what he's choosing," he replied. "Sometimes the one who sees clearest has the greater responsibility." As Cosell left, Ali returned to the newspaper clippings, studying not just Cooper's fighting style, but the face of a man who, in different circumstances, might have been advised never to step into a boxing ring again. The decision forming in Ali's mind would contradict everything the public thought they knew about the brash, dominant champion. It would require a different kind of courage than what was typically celebrated in the brutal world of heavyweight boxing. 3 days later, as the fighters prepared to enter the ring at Cleveland Arena, no one, not the 15,000 spectators, not the millions watching on television, not even Ali's own corner team, could have anticipated what was about to unfold. A moment that would reveal more about the champion's character than any victory ever could. The Cleveland Arena thrummed with excitement as fight time approached. The crowd of 15,000 had generated a gate of nearly $400,000. Impressive. Numbers reflecting the drawing power of the controversial champion. Muhammad Ali had transformed the traditionally stoic world of heavyweight boxing into theater, and audiences couldn't get enough, whether they loved him or hated him. In his dressing room, Ali sat quietly as Angelo Dundee wrapped his hands, the ritual that transformed human hands into legitimate weapons. The champion's usual pre-fight banter was notably absent. No poems, no predictions, no theatrical declarations of his own greatness. "You good, champ?" Dundee asked, sensing something unusual in Ali's demeanor. "I'm always good," Ali replied, flexing his fingers as Dundee finished the wrapping. "Just thinking about how to handle this one." Across the arena, Henry Cooper prepared with the quiet dignity that had earned him the respect of boxing fans on both sides of the Atlantic. At 32, with a 27-12-1 record, he harbored no illusions about being favored against the undefeated champion. But Cooper had always been a fighter who gave everything, regardless of the odds, a quality that had made him beloved in Britain despite never winning a world title. As he warmed up, the butterfly bandages holding together the scar tissue around, his eyes were clearly visible, badges of his many battles and the source of his greatest vulnerability in the ring. With each fight, the cuts opened more easily, requiring more and more stitches, leaving his face increasingly fragile. What neither Cooper nor the public knew was that Muhammad Ali had spent the past 3 days engrossed in a profound moral conflict. The revelation of Cooper's heart condition had triggered something unexpected in Ali, a recognition that the principles he claimed to stand for outside the ring might require difficult choices inside it as well. The night before, Ali had summoned his spiritual advisor and his trainer to his hotel room for a conversation that had stretched into the early morning hours. The content of that discussion remained private, but those close to Ali's camp noticed the champion's unusual solemnity as he prepared for the fight. As the fighters were called to the ring, Ali made his entrance with characteristic showmanship. dancing, playing to the crowd, his white robe gleaming under the arena lights. But keen observers might have noticed that his usual taunting gestures toward his opponent were absent. Instead, as he passed Cooper's corner during the referee's instructions, he offered a respectful nod that momentarily confused both the British fighter and the spectators. The bell rang for round one, and both fighters moved to the center of the ring. Cooper immediately took an aggressive stance, perhaps hoping to replicate the success of his famous left hook that had dropped Ali in their previous encounter. Ali, meanwhile, employed his signature dancing style, circling away from Cooper's power, using his superior reach to keep the challenger at distance. What became apparent to boxing experts watching the fight was that Ali was fighting defensively, not engaging in the rapid-fire combinations that had overwhelmed previous opponents. He landed just enough jabs to establish control of the ring, but none with the devastating power he was capable of delivering. By the third round, blood had begun to appear around Cooper's left eye, the inevitable result of even the lightest contact with his fragile scar tissue. As the crimson streak became more pronounced, Ali's movement changed subtly. He began targeting his jabs exclusively to Cooper's body and gloves, deliberately avoiding the Englishman's increasingly damaged face. In Cooper's corner between rounds, his trainers applied adrenaline and ice to slow the bleeding, but it was clear the cut was worsening. The referee called in the ring doctor to examine Cooper before the start of round 4, but allowed the fight to continue after the British fighter insisted he could see clearly. As the fourth round commenced, a moment occurred that would become one of the most discussed in boxing history. Cooper, frustrated by Ali's elusive style, lunged forward with a wide hook that left him momentarily exposed. Ali had a clear opportunity for a crushing right hand, the kind of punch that had ended many previous fights. The crowd rose in anticipation of the knockout blow, but the punch never came. Instead, cameras captured Ali deliberately pulling the punch, turning what could have been a devastating right cross into a light tap against Cooper's shoulder. He then stepped back, creating distance rather than pressing his advantage. The crowd's roar transformed into a confused murmur as Ali continued to circle, making no effort to capitalize on Cooper's vulnerability. Howard Cosell, calling the fight for ABC, was momentarily speechless, a rarity for the verbose broadcaster. When he found his voice, his observation would be replayed countless times in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something extraordinary. Muhammad Ali, with a clear opportunity to end this fight, deliberately refused to throw the finishing punch. I have never seen anything like this in my 20 years of covering boxing. In Cooper's corner, confusion reigned as the trainers tried to understand Ali's strategy. Was this some new form of psychological warfare, a way to prolong the fight for the television audience, or was something else entirely happening in the ring? As the fight continued into the middle rounds, the pattern became unmistakable. Ali was fighting to control, but not to hurt, using his superior speed and skill to evade Cooper's increasingly desperate attacks while landing just enough punches to maintain his clear lead on the scorecards. By the 7th round, Cooper's face was a mask of blood, most of it coming from the reopened scar tissue around his eyes. The British fighter's white trunks were stained crimson, and his breathing had become labored, not from punishment taken, but from the frustration of chasing an opponent who refused to engage directly. It was during a clinch in this round that ringside microphones picked up a brief exchange between the fighters, words that wouldn't become public until years later when the fight footage was remastered. "Why aren't you finishing me?" Cooper asked, his voice barely audible through his mouthguard. "Not here to hurt you, Henry," Ali replied, "just here to win." As the bell rang, ending the 7th round, Ali walked directly to the referee instead of returning to his corner. "What?" he said, couldn't be heard over the crowd noise. but the referee's expression changed from confusion to understanding. He nodded and then walked to Cooper's corner, where after a brief examination of the Englishman's badly cut face, he waved his hands, stopping the fight. Technical knockout, round 7. Muhammad Ali retained his heavyweight championship. But as the crowd's reaction made clear, a mixture of cheers, boos, and bewildered silence, this was no ordinary victory. Something unprecedented had happened in the ring that night, something that contradicted everything the public thought they knew about the sport of boxing and about Muhammad Ali himself. It would be hours before the full story emerged, and years before the magnitude of Ali's decision would be fully appreciated. The post-fight press conference should have been a celebration of Ali's 17th consecutive professional victory. Instead, it became one of the most unusual media events in boxing history. The champion arrived late, still in his fight attire, the marks of the 7-round battle barely visible on his face, a stark contrast to the heavily bandaged Cooper, who had been taken directly to Cleveland Metropolitan Hospital for treatment of his cuts. The room fell silent as Ali took his seat at the press table, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. Noticing the absence of his usual entourage, several journalists exchanged glances, sensing something unprecedented was about to unfold. Howard Cosell, who had hurried from his broadcasting position to attend the conference, opened with the question everyone wanted to ask. "Muhammad, in the 4th round, you had Cooper lined up for what appeared to be a knockout punch, but you deliberately pulled it. Can you explain what happened there?" Ali looked directly at Cosell, then scanned the room filled with reporters who had often criticized his brashness, his political stands, his religious conversion, men who had frequently portrayed him as arrogant and disrespectful. What he was about to say would challenge every narrative they had constructed about him. "I couldn't throw that punch," Ali began, his voice subdued but clear. "Not when I knew what I knew." A confused murmur rippled through the room. 3 days ago, Ali continued, I learned something about Henry Cooper that changed how I saw this fight. The man has a heart condition, a serious one that his own doctors advised him could be dangerous in the ring. He also has that tissue around his eyes that cuts open every time. These aren't just normal fighting injuries. These are life-threatening conditions. The room fell completely silent as Ali continued. I've spent my life learning how to hit hard, how to hurt people in that ring. That's boxing. That's the job we choose. But there's a difference between beating a man in competition and knowingly doing something that could kill him. One reporter, skeptical of this uncharacteristic display of mercy from the usually dominant champion, called out, "Are you saying you carried Cooper? That you didn't fight your best?" Ali's eyes flashed with momentary anger. "I fought to win, and I did win. The record book will show a TKO in the 7th, but there's a difference between winning a fight and deliberately inflicting unnecessary damage on someone you know is already hurt." "Why go through with the fight at all?" asked another journalist. "That wasn't my decision to make," Ali replied. "Cooper chose to be there. He earned his shot. I respected that choice, but once in the ring I had choices too, about how to win, about what kind of champion I want to be." As the press conference continued, Angelo Dundee confirmed that Ali had discussed his concerns about Cooper's health in the days leading up to the fight. He revealed that Ali had made a deliberate decision to adjust his strategy, to win the fight through technical skill rather than power punching, to target his shots away from Cooper's most vulnerable areas, and to advocate for stopping the fight once it became clear the Englishman was bleeding severely. What emerged from that press conference was an image of Muhammad Ali that contradicted many of the public narratives about him. The man, often portrayed as boxing's most arrogant figure, had demonstrated a level of compassion and ethical consideration rarely acknowledged in the brutal world of heavyweight fighting. The next morning's headlines reflected the complicated reactions to Ali's revelation. Some praised his humanity and sportsmanship. Others questioned whether such mercy had any place in professional boxing. A few cynical columnists suggested it was all an elaborate public relations move by a fighter known for his theatrical manipulations of the media. At Cleveland Metropolitan Hospital, Henry Cooper received the news of Ali's press conference with characteristic dignity. When reporters gathered outside his room seeking comment, the British fighter initially declined to speak. But as the story gained momentum, with speculation running rampant, Cooper finally issued a brief statement that would become as famous as the fight itself. "I entered that ring as a professional boxer, not looking for mercy from anyone. But I'll say this about Muhammad Ali. Yesterday he showed he's not just a great champion, but a great man. He did what no other heavyweight would have done, and I respect him more for it, not less." 3 days after the fight, as Ali prepared to leave Cleveland, he made an unannounced visit to Cooper's hospital room. No cameras were present, no reporters allowed, just two fighters who had shared something extraordinary in the ring. What was said in that private meeting remained between them for many years, though both men would later describe it as a profound conversation that transcended boxing. As the story spread throughout the sports world and beyond, it provoked debates about the nature of competition, about the responsibilities of those with superior power, about when mercy becomes greater than victory. Television networks replayed the footage of Ali pulling that fourth-round punch, analyzing it frame by frame, as if trying to capture the exact moment when a champion decided that some principles matter more than dominance. For Muhammad Ali, already a controversial figure due to his political stands, his religious conversion, his refusal to conform to the expectations placed on black athletes, this incident added another layer to his complex public image. To his critics, it was either a sign of weakness or a calculated performance. To his supporters, it revealed the depth of character behind the theatrical persona. But the true significance of what happened in Cleveland that night would only become fully apparent years later, when the cameras captured another extraordinary moment involving Muhammad Ali, a moment that would connect back to that pulled punch and reveal a pattern of humanity that transcended any single fight. 24 years after the Cooper fight, on October 19, 1990, an aging Muhammad Ali sat in the front row at Madison Square Garden watching a heavyweight bout between James "Buster" Douglas and Evander Holyfield. At 58, Ali's once fluid movements had been severely compromised by Parkinson's syndrome, believed to be related to the cumulative damage he had sustained throughout his boxing career. The irony was not lost on those who remembered his mercy toward Henry Cooper. The man who had once refused to inflict unnecessary damage was now living with the consequences of the damage he himself had absorbed in the ring. As the Garden crowd recognized Ali's presence, a wave of affection swept through the arena. Though his championship days were decades past, his stature had only grown with time. The controversial figure of the 1960s and 70s had transformed in the public consciousness into a global icon, a symbol of principle, courage, and resilience that transcended sports. During a break between rounds, the camera focused on Ali. What happened next was broadcast to millions of homes. A young boy, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, cautiously approached the former champion. Without hesitation, Ali's trembling hands reached out to embrace the child. For almost a full minute, the arena fell silent as the cameras captured this gentle interaction, the once most feared puncher in boxing, displaying a tenderness that brought tears to many eyes. This moment, seemingly disconnected from the long ago fight with Henry Cooper, actually completed a circle in the public's understanding of Muhammad Ali. What he had demonstrated that night in Cleveland, a recognition that true greatness involves knowing when not to use your power, had become the defining characteristic of his legacy. In the years following the Cooper fight, that pulled punch took on almost mythical significance in boxing circles. Trainers used the footage to teach young fighters about sportsmanship. Boxing historians cited it as evidence of Ali's complex character beyond his public persona. Even Cooper himself, in his autobiography published in 1972, devoted an entire chapter to that night, writing, "Ali could have hurt me badly, perhaps ended my career or worse. Instead, he chose to win without destruction. I've never forgotten that distinction." The relationship between Ali and Cooper evolved into an unlikely friendship. When Cooper visited the United States in 1970 for a broadcasting assignment, Ali invited him to his training camp. Photographs of the two former opponents with their arms around each other's shoulders appeared in sports magazines worldwide, a powerful image of reconciliation and mutual respect. In 1992, when Ali returned to Britain for a charity event, Henry Cooper, by then Sir Henry Cooper, having been knighted by Queen Elizabeth II, served as his host. Their joint appearance at London's Royal Albert Hall produced a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. No words were needed. The journey from opponents to friends spoke volumes about both men's character, but the full significance of Ali's decision that night in Cleveland wouldn't be understood until medical advancements revealed more about the long-term effects of boxing. By the early 2000s, research into chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, and other brain injuries had confirmed what many had long suspected. Each punch absorbed can contribute to devastating neurological conditions later in life. In 2011, 15 years after Cooper's death from heart failure at age 76, a symposium on boxing safety at London's Royal College of Physicians featured a panel discussion on Ali's decision in the 1966 fight. A neurologist presented computer modeling, suggesting that had Ali landed the full-force punches he was capable of delivering, given Cooper's already compromised health, the outcome could indeed have been catastrophic. What Ali intuitively understood, in 1966, the neurologist concluded, science has now confirmed his decision to pull that punch and fight in a way that minimized damage wasn't just sportsmanship. It may well have saved Cooper's life or prevented devastating injury. The most powerful validation came from Cooper himself in his final interview before his death in 2011. Asked about his most meaningful memory from his boxing career, he bypassed mention of his famous knockdown of Ali in their first fight, focusing instead on what happened in the rematch. When I learned years later about Ali's concerns and his deliberate decision not to hurt me badly, it changed how I viewed not just him, but what it means to be truly great. Anyone can use their power to destroy. It takes a different kind of strength to hold back when you don't have to. Ali's own physical decline through the 1990s and 2000s added poignant context to that long-ago decision. As Parkinson's syndrome gradually diminished his once extraordinary physical abilities and eventually silenced his famous voice, the contrast became clear. The man who had shown mercy in his moment of greatest power now lived with the consequences of a sport that had shown him none in return. Yet even in his diminished physical state, Ali's presence remained powerful. When he lit the Olympic torch at the 1996 Atlanta Games, his trembling arms holding the flame aloft, the global audience witnessed both the cost of his boxing career and the indomitable spirit that transcended it. Many remembered the pulled punch against Cooper, now understanding it as part of a larger pattern, a glimpse of the true character behind the showmanship. In his final years, as speech became increasingly difficult, Ali communicated largely through his eyes and his touch, the gentle embraces, the twinkling gaze that could still convey both mischief and profound compassion. The hands that could once destroy opponents now served primarily to connect with others through gestures of affection, When Muhammad Ali died on June 3, 2016, tributes poured in from around the world. Among the countless stories shared about his extraordinary life, many returned to that night in Cleveland, the moment when, at the height of his physical powers, the heavyweight champion of the world made a conscious decision to win without unnecessary harm. The footage of that pulled punch has been viewed millions of times on video platforms, studied in ethics classes, referenced in sermons, and used in motivational speeches about the true meaning of strength. What the cameras captured that night, a champion deliberately holding back his full power out of concern for his opponent's well-being, continues to resonate as an eternal reminder that the greatest victories sometimes come not from what we do, but from what we choose not to do. In his own words, from an interview given years after the Cooper fight, when asked about his most meaningful victory, Ali had put it simply, "People remember knockouts, but sometimes the punches you don't throw matter more than the ones you do." That night with Henry, I learned that being the greatest isn't just about being the strongest or the fastest. Sometimes it's about seeing something bigger than winning. Those words, like the pulled punch they describe, continue to echo through boxing history and beyond, a lesson in compassion and humanity from the most unexpected of sources, the squared circle where two men are paid to hurt each other. What the cameras captured that night in Cleveland wasn't just a boxing match. It was a rare moment of grace in a brutal sport. A champion's recognition that true greatness involves not just the skillful application of power, but the wisdom to know when power should be tempered by mercy.